Howdy, y'all. It's your favorite trainer with a belt buckle. Today, we're going to give you a sneak peek in one of the benefits of the online internship all over the world. We have Dr. Cholewa. He's a professor in Virginia, and we go through everything on balance. He even takes a couple cracks at NASM and educates you on proper overload programming and how to become a successful personal trainer. If you haven't sat in on one of our live classes, DM us, shoot us a message on Instagram, Show Up Fitness Internship. Our goal is to change the industry and have successful trainers all over the world. Enjoy this class. Well, I always appreciate you taking time to help us out here. And I have your balance and sport presentation.
Okay.
And I was hoping that you could, educate us and take us through this a little bit to talk, because the big thing with trainers today is it's like we have this sexy terminology, and so you hear things like stabilization, and then we get real excited about it. Especially, I like to poke at certain associations, but like in the OPT model, which is periodization for NASM, they base the whole foundation on this stabilization model, where everything needs to be on unstable surface training. You need to be doing a stability ball, squat, curl, press. You need to be doing BOSU ball work, and everything needs to be unstable. Because it makes sense where if you do something on an unstable, it's hard to balance. Therefore, by using that device, you're going to improve balance. I mean, it kind of, in that way, it sounds like it could work, right?
Yeah, it's intuitive for sure, but not everything that's intuitive is necessarily true. These appeals to intuition are, in a way, they're useful, but when we have empirical evidence and we can use the scientific method to analyze our intuitions to determine whether they're accurate or not, then sometimes they fall apart. And so, just to give a little context about this little PowerPoint here, I teach a 100 level class, so it's all freshmen, and it's lab methods, and they learn how to take blood pressure, body composition, administer some fitness tests. And at the end of the class, we had essentially a day that we didn't really have anything planned. It was a catch-up day, and I gave them an option of, do you want to review or do you want to learn something new? And most of the class actually wanted to learn something new, which was surprising to me, but it was great, right? So then I had them, kind of just write on a piece of paper what they wanted to learn about. And surprisingly, a lot of them wanted to learn about balance and how to improve their balance. Now, at the University of Lynchburg, especially in our program, I would say 2/3 of the students are on some sort of athletics team. Like, we have a huge proportion of the university that's on a team of some sort. And so anyway, that's kind of where this little PowerPoint came from.
And I think that's interesting because to try to relate to them, at least, I would, I'm sure that you could attest that an upper 90, maybe even 100% of them are on social media. And so if they're in the athletic realm, they're probably following professional athletes, LeBron James and so forth. And so you see someone like LeBron James over summer doing, or the big one over summer was Henry from, I think it was from Tennessee. And he was doing some crazy chaos stability ball push-ups. And like even the trainer says, like, oh, it's all about stability, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, holy shit, I want to be like Henry. That guy's absolutely massive. Therefore, I need to train like he does.
Mm-hmm. There's a video from, oh God, it's got to be like 4 years now, of Alvin Kamara, the running back from the Saints. It's like a 6-minute workout with his personal trainer, and it's all stability ball, BOSU ball, all sorts of stuff like that. And if you're uneducated, like, it sounds great. The trainer is relatively articulate, and and tries to explain it with what we would consider logic. But again, logic and intuition sometimes fall apart when we can empirically test these ideas.
And I'll even piggyback off that, Doc, and say that emotion plays into that now too, unfortunately, because they'll challenge it and be like, well, okay, the science may say that, but I'm going to disagree because I did it with a client and they liked it. It's like, you have to be very sensitive today with people because they get so emotionally tied into stuff where it's like, that exercise is now the equivalent of my uncle and it means a lot to me. And so when you make fun of it, you're making fun of me. And it's like, holy shit. Like, you can't even have a friendly little debate anymore on challenging people. And like, I'll say stuff, and I'm aggressive online. I'll say, yeah, BOSU balls are fucking stupid. And they only should be used if you're a therapist. If you don't want to use a towel, it's like, you don't need to spend $100 on a BOSU ball. They're stupid. I got blocked by the CEO of BOSU balls, so I like to make fun of them. And people are like, well, I think that they do play a role in clients programming. And it's like so interesting that it's like, wow, so I really feel for your clients that you have a trainer that really believes that this device plays a role in your future success for movement.
Yeah, we should really kind of specify our population that we're talking about here. And that population, at least for this, is people who are healthy and athletes, right? Because like you said, those devices might have some use in other populations, in populations that are involved in some sort of therapy, right? Or have some sort of neurological disease, or maybe even in elderly individuals who have low functional capabilities. It might be a way to increase proprioception, etc. But when we talk about athletes, when we talk about individuals who are biomechanically healthy, or however you want to term that, then that is really what we're talking about here in this PowerPoint. And I think also for personal trainers, that's what the majority of their clients are. Like, even middle-aged individuals who are deconditioned, right? We can still apply most of what is found in this little lesson to them.
And I absolutely agree. And for those that are listening, I think it's important that you don't jump to conclusions. And so, he's talking about the general pop that we're working with and also athletes. And you may have heard him say, well, okay, well, senior citizens, they need to be using these devices. That's not necessarily what he was saying. He's saying that it may be a viable option as a regression or a progression. It doesn't mean someone 70, they have to be doing BOSU ball work or stability ball work. You implement the fundamentals of movement with progressive overload. You don't need to put everyone on one of those balls. That, just to clarify, would you agree?
I agree. Yes, thank you for that.
and so let's talk about this a little bit.
All right. So the objectives of this were to identify the three senses that coordinate physical balance, define proprioception. Again, we're talking about freshmen who probably have never been exposed to these terms before. Identify some of the major kinesthetic proprioceptors. And then really what I wanted to get into is to investigate the relationship between proprioceptor training and sport performance.
Right.
And here we have the three major sensors that go into what we would consider balance. And balance is kind of a hard term to define, as it is, at least it is for me. But our vision plays a role. Try walking, squatting, doing a body weight squat, etc., with your eyes closed, and see how that affects your ability to perform that movement. We then have the vestibular and the inner ear, which plays a role in our balance as well. oftentimes, especially in elderly individuals, when they have falls, oftentimes they'll evaluate the inner ear. There's it's been a while since I've read about this or taught about this, but there's fluid in there, and you can almost imagine it like a level like we use for carpentry that relays information. And then finally is proprioception, and proprioceptors are found in the skin, in the joints, in the tendons, and they relay information to the brain. And all of this information is coordinated in the brain or the central nervous system, and that goes into our ability to balance, or what we would heuristically term as balance.
And do you remember the name of the 3 bones in the inner ear?
Let's see, the scapy, the hammer, the anvil, and it's been a while.
There you go. It's the incus malleus and the stapes.
That's right.
I always teach you the anvil, the hammer, and the stirrup, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yep. All righty. So you want me to click on this one?
Yeah, let's see. I forget what this was. It's been about a year since I've used this.
Casey Cantazaro at the Dallas. It's loading right now.
All right. Well, we don't have to, but I can describe it. If you've ever watched American Ninja Warrior,
Oh, okay, yeah.
This is the little gymnast, and basically just crushing the course. So it's a pretty good example of proprioception, right? Think of Simone Biles,
Yeah.
and some of her work as a gold medal Olympian gymnast. Another good example of proprioception and balance.
Yeah, so the link will be in it. It's gonna play an ad, so I'm just gonna go back to the presentation.
Yeah,
but yeah, they can get an idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
All right. So, you can read the definition, but proprioceptors essentially relay information from the periphery, including the position and the movement of the body and the limbs, the amount of muscle tension or force, the sense of effort, and the sense of balance. And so all of this is relayed from the periphery to the central nervous system. And so it's processed at subconscious levels. We also kind of term these reflexes, right? Like when the doctor taps your knee to test your patella ligament. So anytime we're dealing with balance, most of what is happening is occurring subconsciously, lower down in the central nervous system without conscious thought about it. Imagine, for example, my parents' house backs up to railroad tracks, and as kids, we would walk along the tracks, and see who can balance on the track itself for the longest period of time. And you'd walk, and eventually you kind of like go like this and put your arms this way, etc., to try and maintain your balance. You're not thinking, all right, I'm leaning to the left, so I need to counterbalance to the right and stick my right arm out and maybe my right leg out to try and counterbalance myself. Right? None of that is happening consciously. It's all happening more subconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
Here we have a chart of our sensory system. And what I really want to look at is our somatosensory, or our sixth sense, as it shows in this chart. In particular, we're looking at the various proprioceptors within this, right? Because we have nocioceptors, pain receptors for temperature, that inner ear playing a role in that I'm going to try to pronounce that. Anyways, so we have proprioceptors in our joints that sense range of motion. We have proprioceptors that sense movement. We have proprioceptors that sense force, as well as proprioceptors that play a role in sensing change in velocity.
And so when you mean, the vestibular is not in retrospect, but it works a lot with balance. And then this one, obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about more with the kinesthesia. There's even people out there that will say balance can't be trained. Have you heard that before, or?
I haven't, but I believe it. I mean, I
Okay.
believe that people have said that,
Oh,
not
okay.
that it
Okay.
can or cannot be trained. Kind of have like a big bang final statement. So I'll save it for the end
Okay.
when we talk about that. Here are some of the major proprioceptors. As you can see, there's a number for fine touch and for fine motor skills. Right? The first three are all related to fine motor skills. Most of what we
sorry to cut you off, but how do you say 1 and 4?
What's that?
How do you say 1 and 4?
4 is Ruffini corpuscles.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1, I'm not totally sure exactly how it's pronounced. Pacinian corpuscles, if I had to take a guess, and let my Italian come out. I don't know.
I've always been curious because I've read about them and I'm just like, fuck, I don't know I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. But the major ones that are involved in proprioception, especially as they may relate to balance, that's right. Muscle spindle fibers and your Golgi tendon organs. Those are probably 2 that are most related to balance.
And every single NASM trainer in the world knows that because those are 2 vocab words that they make you memorize. And what they do is like a question will be like when you do a static stretch, which part of the mechanoreceptor are you stimulating? It's muscle spindles. And then when you foam roll via autogenic inhibition, you are quote unquote relaxing the muscle, and therefore the Golgi tendon is what's being affected there. Those are 2 NASM terms that they like to talk about.
So here we have the muscle spindle, and the exercise I would use in class is close your eyes, put your hands out to the side, and have a person give you a low 5, right? So what's happening is that person slaps your hand and there's a rebound in it. Again,
So that's the spindle. And is that via a terminology I remember from college? And that's why I always love having you on here to put you on the spot. But it's like words that at the time I wouldn't really know what it meant. But is that what would be referenced as a polysynaptic loop?
I don't know.
Okay. Because like how the nervous system works in like an autonomic one, which would be more of like a plyometric, and they'll talk about a monosynaptic loop and how it's made in the spinal column. Like those are things that I don't know.
So I'm not definitely not a neurologist, right? And most of my training is in biochemistry, so just kind of take that as you will. With that said, my understanding is when you do have a reflex like that, it's processed subconsciously in the spinal cord, but information is also relayed up to the brain, to the conscience. So like, the hand is slapped, it goes down, it comes back up. That reflex is subconscious, but you are also consciously aware of what just happened. Even with your eyes closed, you're consciously aware that your elbow extended and then flexed back into position. So that information is relayed up to higher brain centers. And so these muscle spindles are special fibers within the muscle tissue that sense stretch. And in response to stretch, they not only contract themselves, but also result in an efferent coming from the central nervous system, telling that whole muscle itself to contract. So again, slap the hand, right? Elbow extends, the bicep is stretched, the muscle spindle itself contracts in response to that stretch. It sends a signal to the spinal cord, and then a signal is sent back to the muscle, telling it to contract in response to that stretch.
That's a good image right there. You can really see the semis and the bicep femoris in that one. I like that. You didn't want to be the volunteer for this photo?
I don't know how many people would appreciate that.
That's what you were. Sorry, I thought I got those. Protecting. Yep.
Go back a second. So a couple things to note here is that the level of contraction is not only related to the level of stretch, but also to the velocity of lengthening. In other words, the faster that muscle is lengthened, the greater the efferent signal or reaction is going to be to contract. So if your bicep, like if you go from here to here nice and slowly, there's no reaction. However, if you're slapped and it's a very quick stretch, there is a reaction. And this mechanism protects against tissue and joint damage. Mostly protects against hyperextending a joint, for example. So, imagine again, here we have a person trying to balance on one foot on a dock piling. And you can see in the image, this person is losing their balance, or so it would appear. So as he falls, certain muscles are rapidly stretching. And this stretch is going to trigger a complex reflex. Some of the reflex is going to be specific muscle contraction. So for example, let's just use the hamstrings as an example. When the hamstrings are rapidly stretched, as in, let's say you're doing high kicks. So you do like a high kick, the hamstring is rapidly stretched, muscle spindles fire, right? That results in a contraction of that muscle. But you will also get some agonist contraction. So the hamstrings extend the hips, and that signal will result in other muscles being recruited that play a role in extending the hips. The glutes, and maybe adductor magnus as well. Two other major hip extensor muscles will be recruited to help extend the hip. So some of that is that agonist contraction. And then some of it is what's known as spatial contralateral movement. So this is a series of best I understand it, motor programs where if you are falling to the right, as this person is falling to the right, you'll have contralateral, so on the opposite side of the body movement to try and balance yourself out. As you can see, his left leg is now being kicked out to the side to try and counterbalance. Again, imagine walking a little balance beam and that happening, you fall to the left, you start reaching to the right with your right arm and right leg. And that's that spatial contralateral movement occurring. And that's just kind of to show you some muscle spindles in action, right? We have Simone Biles performing one of her jumps. And as she lands on, I don't even know what that is. But as she lands on it, her muscles are rapidly being stretched and they're rapidly contracting to propel her even further in height. Now, there's also a lot of rotation going on, but this is essentially one of the actions of the muscle spindle. You can also imagine in plyometric, where we utilize that muscle spindle or that stretch shortening cycle, the rapid lengthening combined with the contraction and then the conscious decision to contract or explode, to jump even higher. Same thing when someone uses a running start to try and jump, whether that is to jump to, say, clear a high jump, or to jump to try and dunk a basketball or touch something up high. We're using the same mechanism. As our foot hits the floor, we get some very rapid contraction through our kinetic chain, and that basically sets off some of those muscle spindles. So another major proprioceptor is the Golgi tendon organ. And that Golgi tendon organ is found in the myotendinous junction, where the muscle and the tendon join. And the Golgi tensor senses force, and it essentially acts as a force regulator to help prevent tendon damage. When force being produced by the muscle exceeds a certain threshold, that Golgi tendon organ, or that GTO, will sense it, will relay that information to the spinal cord, and as a result, the spinal cord will efferently decrease the amount of force being produced by the muscle. So it prevents tears or damage to the musculotendinous junction. All right, so a little application here. Heavy training generates large tensions in muscles. These are transmitted to the musculotendinous junction to pull on bones to allow us to move. And so as a result of heavy training, specifically resistance training, the Golgi tendon organ adapts and its sensitivity decreases. A very easy way to think about this is it allows for more force to be let through. Allowing more force to be let through, or reduced sensitivity, means we can not only produce more force during high force movements, like a squat or a deadlift or a bench press, but it also means we can produce more force during high speed movements, like jumps, sprints, changes in direction, what we might consider agility, etc. So heavy strength training will desensitize that Golgi tendon organ. And in addition to the muscles being able to generate more force, this is a neurological adaptation that will allow for improvements in strength and power.
You say heavy, is that any resistance training, or are you talking like less than 10, less than 5 reps, or?
It would depend upon the training status of the individual. You take someone who's untrained, and 10 to 15 reps would likely induce those adaptations, maybe even more reps than that, simply because you're exposing them to loads that they are not adapted to. But the more trained someone is, then likely the heavier those loads would need to be. The greater the relative intensity would need to be, the lower the repetitions.
Want me to pull up some of these?
Yeah, I don't know what these are. I think one is Alvin Kamara.
Okay, so is that the one where his?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. Like I said, it's been a while.
Oh yeah, it says Alvin's amazing because of training in spite of his training. So is this? Let me see here. This is. Yeah, my internet's not liking me right now. Okay, yeah, this is interesting because this guy is I like that because this guy is a DPT, and his name is Dr. Reef online. He has almost like 1 million followers. And so like, so
Yeah, this is the video I was talking about. All right.
And so this is great because so here's the crazy thing is talking about appeal to authority, right? Where you got your DPT, doctor of physical therapy. If you want to make a case for the best certification, CSCS, and he's working with top athletes out there, and so then you do this bullshit, and people are like, oh, well, that's what you should be doing, right?
Yeah, and I don't think we can relay the sound to the people,
Yeah,
watching this video.
I can. You can't hear it, can you?
No,
Yeah,
but you can always go back and listen and follow the links or whatever, and so you can just kind of scroll through it and like show, yeah, there we go, like all the silly things that he has him doing.
I like this because this is and so then you even have even worse. So it's like you have, okay, amazing athlete, and then 30 TDs. And why is that? It's because of his training. And I'll talk to students about this and make reference to, it's like the software of these elite athletes is just, it's insane. And so, you could literally give them any stimulus and they're going to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And so
yeah, if you watch that video, right, that trainer at least intuitively makes a good case of why that training would be effective to improve his performance on a football field. We're challenging a lot of proprioception in doing those different exercises, especially when he's he's standing on the BOSU ball and he's throwing that, I don't know, it's almost like a juggling pin at him with different colors and telling him to catch the colors, right?
mm-hmm.
So you're definitely very challenged in doing that. The question is not, is that impressive? Because yes, it's impressive. The question is, does that actually translate to better reaction time on the football field? Does it translate to improved ability to change direction or agility? Does it transfer to any sort of improvements in power or being able to stay on your feet, aka balance, on the football field? And so what we have in these next few studies that we have the abstracts, or I guess like the results from, is basically the answer to that is mostly no. So in this particular study, they had a strength training group and an unstable surface group. And what they found was strength training improved performance, and unstable surface really didn't improve performance. And this was done in soccer players.
The good old University of Connecticut. That's Cressy and Kramer. They were, and Carl Marsh is the head of that department. And I was there a year prior to this, but this was like one of the monumental studies in balance that I always reference. And I always throw out all the NASM heads out there and they lose their shit because they'll say, well, if it's a 2000, and the argument that you give is it's a 2021 textbook, it has to be updated information. And so it's hard because when I try to, as a teacher of trainers, I try to educate in a polite way. And I say, even though it's a new textbook, it doesn't mean that the information is correct. And a physical therapist really, in my opinion, shouldn't be at the forefront of program design for general population. They should do what they're really good at, which is working with injuries and injuries and prehab rehab. Whereas strength coaches and people who really know how to program, they should be the ones designing programs for general population. But that program in itself is the fundamentals, the foundation of movement is based on unstable surface, which just blows my mind.
Yeah. Getting back to this study really quick, it's quite interesting. Some, I guess, is to be expected, right? The strength training group saw improvements in power, and I think BDJ is the broad jump. I'm not sure off the top of my head. CMJ is the counter movement jump. And then the unstable surface group did not improve in these at all. You saw greater improvements in sprints, both short and in the 10 yards, so acceleration, and then 40 yard in the strength training group. And then what you might expect to see, which it would be improvements in change of direction, right? That's intuitively what we might expect from this unstable surface training. Greater proprioception should result in greater ability to change direction. And it didn't. In fact, there were greater improvements, though not statistically significant, in the strength training group in the ability to change direction in that t-test. Here we have two more studies, basically showing the same thing. Either no greater improvements in performance as a result of unstable surface training, and or even a reduction therein. So why is Alvin Kamara so great? And why are some of the other athletes so great that that take part in this? And there's two real reasons why. One is strength. Like, despite that type of training, Alvin Kamara is still just freakishly strong. There's some video, and I'm a Saints fan, so I'm kind of being biased here in my selections, but there's some videos of him as a rookie where he's doing really unconventional strongman type training in the off season and just doing some really impressive feats of strength, but also practice. And so when we talk about balance, balance is very specific to whatever you are training for. And so Alvin Kamara has amazing balance on the football field. His ability to stay on his feet, to tiptoe the sidelines, one-handed catches, all these amazing feats of athletic ability. And more than likely, if you put him on a surfboard, he's not going to do all that well, at least not the first time trying to surf. And vice versa, right? We take some surfers who display amazing feats of balance on a board and attempt to have them do some of the same things as Alvin Kamara, and they're going to look just like an average human being trying to do it. And so balance is just incredibly specific to the task at hand. If you want to get really good at balancing on a BOSU ball or a Swiss ball or an unstable surface, then practice that. But that improvement in proprioception there has very limited transfer to improvements in proprioception that are related to whatever sport you're playing. So how can we get athletes stronger, or sorry, how can athletes or even general pop people increase their balance and agility? So first we have to take a step back and define agility, or at least having some sort of working definition of agility. Because the 5-10-5 test, the t-test, all these tests, all they do is test change of direction. For those who aren't aware, the t-test, you run 10 yards, turn 90 degrees, run 5, turn 180 degrees, run 10, 180 degrees, run 5, 90 degrees, back to the start, correct? Okay. So that is a test of change of direction. It's not a test of agility. Agility involves coordinating some sort of sensory to the change of direction. So again, we'll use football as an example. When I played way back in high school, we would do this test where we'd have to essentially jog in place or do high knees. And then the coach would point the football in a certain direction. I would have to run in that direction. They point it in another direction. I would have to run in that direction. So that would be more of a test of agility, because here we are, we're integrating environmental cues to our movements. So how can we get better at balance, change of direction, and agility? So first is to get stronger. And training on unstable surfaces is not as effective as training on stable surfaces when it comes to improving the force production capabilities of our muscles. And there are plenty of studies that demonstrate this. Squatting on the ground is going to result in stronger glutes and hamstrings and quadriceps, and even the core muscles compared to squatting on a BOSU ball. Another study looked, I think it was at doing overhead presses seated on a bench with no back versus doing overhead presses seated on a Swiss ball. And if I remember correctly, they even saw greater improvements in core strength seated on a bench, on a stable surface, doing overhead presses than on a stability ball. And that's because you can use a greater load, right? You want to get stronger, you need to lift heavier weights. You can lift a lot heavier weights on a stable surface compared to an unstable surface. Second,
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'll wait until you're done to ask some questions.
Right. Second, unstable work can be done on solid ground to help build stabilizer strength and coordination. For example, split stance exercises, split squats, Bulgarian or rear foot elevated split squats, step ups, lunges of all sorts. All those exercises have a level of instability to them, despite the fact that they're being performed on a stable surface. Same thing with dumbbells. And so these movements can help to build some stabilizer strength, and certainly will build greater coordination than, say, performing a leg press. Now, a leg press is great. You can really load it up with limited risk of injury and really build strength in your quads. But those other exercises will build some additional coordination. And then finally is actually translating this to improve performance. And this is where practice comes in. One of the reasons why professional athletes have such great agility is in part because they're strong and powerful, but also because they can very quickly integrate environmental cues to movement reactions. And so the more they see those environmental cues, the better they become at reacting to them, and the faster those reactions become, and especially the more efficient and effective those reactions become. So you think about a running back evading a linebacker trying to tackle him. The more they see the linebacker trying to tackle him, the more they're exposed to it, the faster they can integrate and effectively react. And you can apply that to any sport, right? Someone jumping for a rebound, or reacting to a ground ball, or the list goes on and on.
And so it's like the conundrum I feel like that we're in with social media and the constant search for likes, where if I post a video of me doing a split squat overhead press, it's like, whoopee, it's 7 likes. But I do a post on back leg on a stability ball, front leg on a BOSU ball, upside down kettlebell press, left arm out with bands on, and I do that, I get 3,000 likes. And so for me to play the devil's advocate to Chris, it's like we can marry the two, but you always got to look at the health of the individual. So I look at Kamara and him doing that exercise, and I think, okay, worst case scenario, he falls off that ball, he breaks a wrist. What's that conversation going to be like with the owner of the Saints? Hey, oh, by the way, he's on the IR now and he can't make the playoffs and he's out for the rest of the year because of this really cool exercise I was doing. Versus, can you put that into a program? I mean, I guess maybe a regressed version like on a BOSU ball where it's not nearly as dangerous, but then you always got to ask the why. And I call it the Final Destination game. If you've ever seen those movies, Final Destination,
Yeah.
it's like, random shit's falling on you and you hit your carotid and you die. So I always ask the students, like, if worst case scenario, something were to happen, he were to fall, break a wrist, break his back, that's on you. So always have a rationale for why. So like my thing on that one, why wouldn't you just have him stand on one leg and then maybe even close an eye and then throw that thing at him? That's a lot safer. And so it's tough because the balance is it's a sexy term today. And people, like you said, that's really great data from your class. Like these are younger people that want to learn more about balance. And to a certain degree, and to summarize everything, it's like, it's very complex. There's a lot of work within the physiological systems of the body. Getting stronger is going to help a lot. But then you just get to the fundamentals of how a body adapts to a stimulus, and when you give it a stimulus, it's going to get better at it because practice makes perfect, and it's just repetition. And if you have someone do stability ball squat curl press and you overload that exercise, they're going to get better at it, they're going to get stronger, their balance will improve, but their balance didn't necessarily improve optimally due to that device. It was the fact that we just overloaded and got stronger. Would you, agree within reason, or what are some things that you wanted to share at the end?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I have a couple thoughts on it, or I should say, a couple thoughts. And if you hear weird noises, that's my dogs in the background. Sorry. So number one is consider your population. And or I should say athletes, especially professional athletes or high-level athletes, we need to think about what is going to generate results effectively and safely, especially when we get into these high levels, because they're very close to their genetic ceiling, or whatever term you want to use there. So the rate of adaptation is much smaller in high-level athletes that are really trained than in general pop or individuals who have minimal training experience. You can think about just like a competitive powerlifter who may gain 10, 15 pounds on their bench press in 1 year. And that's fantastic. That's really impressive to take someone's bench press, say, from 700 to 715. But you take, like, I don't know, a high school senior who's never worked out before, and you put 15 pounds on their bench press, you really didn't do anything. I mean, they might have gained 15 pounds on their bench press just from development alone. Mm-hmm. So when we are working with these advanced populations, it's very important to use methods that are going to deliver effective results. The other thing to think about is a lot of these populations, they are used to the monotony of practice and training, right? Think about, you hear stories about professional basketball players who go and shoot free throws for 2 hours straight to become a better free throw shooter. For days on end, they shoot free throws for 2 hours straight before practice. How many people in the general population can go and do something like that on a consistent basis? Not many, because they're going to find it real boring, real fast. And so these high-level athletes, they're used to the boredom or the monotony, the process. Some of them relish it, not all, but some. But with your general population, right, we still need to find some novelty or enjoyment in it to keep them coming to us and working out. And with that also, the means maybe don't need to be quite as effective when we're trying to build good habits and consistency. So we can mix in a little bit of these more novel exercises that are flashy, as long as they're safe, as long as the meat and potatoes of the training system are effective, overload, specificity, variation.
Now, my brain is looking at, I'm trying to think like that strength coach / therapist. And, and when you look at, general adaptation syndrome and you create a stimulus, the body adapts, it's going to become better. I wonder where with the athletic population at that level, I mean, we're talking the 0.01 percenters. You're so damn strong that how much stronger can we get? And where is that line in the sand where, if someone's supposed to be like, for example, for me, like a decent bench, and I'm a wimp, it's like 275 for a couple reps. But I remember when I was at Connecticut and I was working with Ben Gordon, who was at the time one of the fittest athletes in the world. He could do 225 for 35 reps. And so it's like, okay, that's endurance for him. So like, where do we have to go to 425 to get a good 6 to 8 reps? And so, what if he comes in one day, or if he's so gifted, he's kind of fucking around and he has the 425 on there and he moves, he hurts his shoulder. And now he's going to be thinking, it's all that benching that fucked up my shoulder, but it's just, he wasn't there mentally. And so when you do some of this kind of this fuckery that you see on Instagram, the load is significantly less, but there is a different stimuli that you're not getting with the benching at that amount. So I wonder if, maybe that's how there is a small adaptation that they're getting, or is there any maybe credibility to that aspect to it, or what?
I have two thoughts on that. One is, depending upon what piece of research you look at or scientific opinion, it appears that the ability to do a full squat with twice body weight is strong enough for most. When we're talking about developing power, like, for speed and jumping purposes, then about squatting twice body weight appears to be strong enough.
Okay.
Not always, but for many. And then anything beyond that, and again, we're generalizing because some people are, may just have the anthropometrics where they may never get there or whatever. But beyond that threshold, you have to invest so much time and volume and recovery to get stronger than that it really limits your ability to develop other attributes. But for most people, a twice body weight squat is the type of force production they need to maximize power output. So that's one thought of strength. But the other is, thinking about Ben Gordon, is what kind of loads has he been exposed to? Or really anyone for that matter, even if they are just naturally freakishly strong. So if they are typically exposed to those high loads, even if it is bench pressing 400 for 6 reps, if they are exposed to those loads regularly, then the risk of injury is relatively low compared to, say, normally they're doing high reps with whatever the weight, whether it's 225 or 135, and then they try to max out. Then there's a much higher risk of injury simply because they haven't exposed their tissues to that type of loading.
Mm-hmm. And then you get just two last little things. You get the camp of, like, are you familiar with Mike Boyle?
A little bit, yeah.
And so he's real big into the It makes sense. Like, could you have an athlete who can squat 500, say that is twice his body weight, but why not just do 225 on Bulgarians? And then you're going to lessen the tension on, low back and stuff like that. But that's, getting into a unilateral comparison versus, because like, what would that translate into for a bilateral squat? If you look at an athlete, football, basketball, baseball, it's like the sport really isn't that specific. It's more unilateral. So then you also maybe I mean, I think that you're going to get more benefits from doing more split stance stuff because of the balance aspect, as you were alluding to earlier. But also, it is a lesser degree of the overall pound, the volume of the exercise too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I believe there's been a study or two done that looked at sprint and jump outcomes in response to exclusively bilateral versus unilateral training, and found a small advantage for bilateral training.
Oh,
so squats outperforming the single leg movements. And the reason for that is you can generate more force on a bilateral movement than on a single leg movement. So you might generate, let's say, 100 newtons of force. This is just a completely arbitrary number, split between your two legs on a squat. Whereas on a single leg movement, you may only generate 45 newtons per leg. So it's a lower force generation, and that's why they see those differences. But the ecological validity of this is relatively low. Like, who just trains, besides like the people in the Mike Boyle camp, who just trains unilateral and who just trains bilateral? Like, why not both?
Yeah, I think that's a great conclusion with it all. Is that what they refer to as the unilateral deficit?
It's actually, I think it's called the
bilateral deficit.
Bilateral deficit.
Yeah.
And I don't recall the exact definition off the top of my head, but yeah.
As you know, one of my favorite things to do at the end is to take a look at a program that may be out there and to get your professional opinion. So going off of the whole idea with balanced training, if someone were to, in your class, turn in this as a homework assignment for resistance training, you have total body. We're starting out a ball, squat, curl, press into a standing cable chest press, standing cable row, shoulder, dumbbell scaption, step up balance. So we're doing this in a big circuit. So we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll then rest. We'll actually start to do a floor bridge, then we'll rest for 90 seconds, and we'll do that for 2 rounds. You got to make sure to add in 10 minutes of warming up and 10 minutes of cooling down. What are your thoughts on that? I know it's one small little piece of the puzzle, but when you look at that, what kind of goes through your mind?
What the hell is a jump squat with stabilization? like what plyometric is done slow?
So they have you pause at the very bottom and you hold that position.
Okay. So there's definitely a more technical term for that everyone outside of NASM uses. I think it's like I don't know. Anyways, yeah. What was the question?
When you look at a program like this, so what goes through your mind? Like, is this a decent program or what?
Probably not. We don't know the population in mind, but it said optimum. So
we're going with someone like Jane Doe who wants to lose weight. That's what they're saying. Jane Doe who wants to lose weight.
So let's just assume that this person is physically healthy. They don't have any limited injuries or anything like that. Then probably not. So if you can curl the weight, it's going to be way too light for squats. And for most people, probably too light for presses. So maybe you'll overload the biceps, but you're not going to overload any of the large lower body muscles, and probably not the deltoids and triceps used in the, I'm assuming it's overhead press here. So that's kind of a waste of time. Standing cable chest press, again, right? The load, we're probably not going to do a very good job of overloading the pecs and the delts and the triceps, simply because it's going to be an awkward movement. Like, I can see where that would have some utility, but if that's all we're doing as a horizontal push, definitely not the best choice. Same thing with a standing cable row. Scaptions are all, what is a standing dumbbell scaption? Is that like pressing up like that?
You're going to be here. You're going to go on here.
Oh, okay. All right.
Single joint.
Sure. Yeah, I just see it's not very well balanced in terms of targeting all the major muscle groups. There's not a very lot of overload that's likely occurring. And you know, if the person is at a level where they need to do, where they are just not fit enough to do more traditional, easy to load exercises, whereby these are the exercises that they can do, that they feel comfortable doing, that's not causing them any sort of pain or whatever, then there's no reason, then the plyometrics should be out of the question. Like, if they can do plyometrics, then they can do more effective, traditionally loaded exercises, like press or squat or bench press or rows or whatever.
It's always fast. Like, I look at these, and I honestly think that what happens is, like, they pay a third company, some freaking nerds who never did anything, and they paid them X amount and said, hey, do some programs with this, because when you look at this for an hour program, this would take significantly longer than an hour, just for the fact that you have 2 calf muscles, you have 2 adductor groups, you have 2 lats. This is going to take you 6 minutes of foam rolling for that first one, 6 minutes there. And then you do 5 minutes of cardio. So you do 11-minute warm. It's like, the programming is just so disastrous. And I really feel, it's like, I have to take a step back, and I love your hand gesture. You're like, what the fuck? But imagine a new trainer who really believes that this is quote unquote the gold standard, as they say they are. And it's like, okay, now I'm going to go out there and I'm going to start training people. And imagine, Doc, you came in and you met with a trainer and they took you through this. I would walk out of there in the first 2 seconds and be like, are you kidding me? This is idiotic. And so it's tough, because you have so many trainers that are passionate. They really want to do this, but the tools that they're learning and they're given are not setting them up for success. And this is fuckery, in my opinion. And now they're trying to get better with including patterns of movement. But then even you look at this isn't a pattern of movement. It's a squat, curl, and a press. Why not just do a squat, as you were saying, and then do a press, and then do a curl at the end as like a client's choice down here, as they're going to call it. It's not an optimal for the chest press row. Okay, why are we doing I guess we got the multi-jointed press up here, so we're just going to do a scaption. Why not do a lateral raise? And then it's just that you can't make any sense out of it. And that's what's frustrating, is you have trainers that aren't being taught the fundamentals, where it shouldn't be the exercise. It should be how to incorporate the proper movement based on the client's goal, and then teach them how to progressively overload based off of the environment and restrictions, or if they're capable, as you would think someone who is doing plyometrics could be doing things that are a little more progressed.
Yeah, these always have me at just a loss for words. And I don't know if it's kind of like that, like social media, like mindset of, I'm not blaming it on social media, I'm just making an analogy of we got to be novel and creative, and that's all that matters, is novelty and creativity. over effectiveness and results.
And just overall the fundamentals of actual movement.
Yeah.
So, well, I know you're super busy, and I always appreciate your time. And this is really, really helpful for us. And people, when they watch these, they always have great comments, and they love it. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this for everyone today.